Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. It is fair to say that we have hit the dog days of summer, as it is hard for me to act excited about the news in the NBA. But don't worry, there's still plenty of racism tangentially related to sports for us to talk about. I'm your host, Andres Alvarez. You can find me on Twitter as Nerd Numbers. And with me today is my fabulous producer, Brian Foster. You can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Give a shout out, Brian.
What's up, Dre? You know, if it's the dog days, does that mean you're calling your dogs to come out and join us on the show like usual?
No, the door is actually shut in the
Oh,
office.
okay.
If you hear some scratching at the door, that might be them. They do that sometimes. Way my dogs typically work is they'll be quiet and calm until the show starts. Then that's when they start making noise. All right, so there's actually a fair bit of topics I'd like to talk. I want to talk last week's kind of show and follow-up post I wrote. Sadly, I want to talk a little bit more about racism in sports, particularly the WWE. And then we're going to kind of talk the Sacramento Kings and what the heck's going on there. Then we will give you a blow-by-blow, play-by-play, player-by-player. Well, I'll just read over the list and tell you how meh so many of these offseason moves are. And then we got some good shout. I'm actually proud of this, Brian. You got some shout-outs, and I've got some comments on your shout-outs this week. So we've got an action-packed show, or at the very least, a show. All right. Actually, what I want to talk first is kind of interesting. We'll get back to him when we talk player transaction, but let's just start. I'm going to throw you an audible immediately, Brian. Let us just start
Ooh,
with
good,
David Lee.
good. Oh, yeah, I'd love to.
David Lee was finally, I'll put that in quotes, traded by the Warriors. Not for much. I don't know much about the second player he was traded for, but he was traded for Chris Babb and Gerald Wallace. And according to the numbers, David Lee played close to star level last season, but he only played about 900 minutes and was pretty limited in the playoffs. Additionally, with his salary at this point, this year with the salary cap, getting rid of him was essentially worth $50 million to the bottom line of the Warriors. It's entirely a cash move, and it makes sense. On the one hand, I don't mind overpaying for productive players if you're using him. In David Lee's case, not really getting used, so that makes a lot of sense. Gerald Wallace was a good player. I don't know what the status is, because I usually find out in most of these that, they'll get waived or whatever. That's why they're making the trade. He's been a productive, albeit injured player most of his career, and I don't really know anything about Chris Babb. I'm not going to lie.
Me either.
So anyway, I mean, it's not an exciting trade. This is entirely a bottom line money trade. But the advantage is when it's a bottom line money trade, but it's not for one of your key starters, you don't really have to worry. The reason I wanted to talk about David Lee was actually just to talk the Warriors in general, because there was another Zach Lowe piece this week. Not even going to bother reading over it, but essentially there was some talk with Draymond Green, and I forget the player he was talking to that brought this up.
I heard this interview, and it's a great interview. I highly recommend it.
Was it Dudley?
It was Jared Dudley. Yeah, he is awesome. Man, I'm a big Jared Dudley fan after hearing that hour-long interview.
But they were talking about like the emergence of small ball, and this really bugs me because if you look at the Warriors, this team has Andrew Bogut. It has a lot of, relatively big players. If you were comparing this to older rosters, the NBA in general is getting bigger. I'm fairly certain. This is something I'm going to do some point this week is look over the height and weights of the Warriors compared to the league. And I'm fairly certain you're not going to find that they're a small team. I mean, their guards and wings, if you're looking at Draymond Green, Harrison Barnes, Klay Thompson, Andre Iguodala, these are all players, 6'6" to 6'8" with good weight on their body. Now, what you can say is, yeah, it's not as big, maybe it's plugging them in as a power forward, but a trick in the NBA is if all of your players are kind of taller at the smaller positions, basically looking at guards and wings, then essentially your team can kind of outmuscle those positions. And if you don't have one of the top tier centers when you're talking, having bigs, that can work out in your favor. Now, the argument basically goes, you want bigs that are kind of, can space the floor, can do things. I'm not against the idea of wanting bigs that are more versatile in their skill sets. I just get annoyed at seeing this small ball meme. And then additionally, one thing that we kind of get into is looking at the wrong metrics. There was a fantastic book called The Sports Gene that talked about height. And what it brought up is that if we look at height, and Dave's done this as well, if we look at height compared to performance in the NBA, it doesn't really matter that much. But one thing worth considering is Draymond Green has a 7'2" wingspan. And so if you're looking at what you want your players in the NBA to do, basically be able to move around and get the ball, rebounds, etc., Draymond Green is built for that. So to me, it seems like kind of a misnomer to say Draymond Green is showing the new NBA where, you're going to have these smaller players that are more whatever. When the reality is he has gigantic arms. He's still a tall player in theory. The same was true of like Dennis Rodman. It's just not tall in the way people think. So it's kind of, to me, a little misleading when they say we're looking for small ball, and what they really mean is we're looking for players with long arms, and we don't care as much about height. Which, yeah, no duh, that's been the case for all of NBA history, and it still doesn't change the fact that having players that are really big and able to dominate. Look at LeBron James. LeBron James would have been a center in the '60s. Hasn't really changed the NBA, and I get so sick of the small ball meme. It's really talented players, and typically talented players in the NBA do usually have some level of physicality. And if they don't, you don't care. But I don't think Draymond Green is an example of small ball. I don't think Jared Dudley is an example of small ball. I think they're both talented players that have the skill set to rebound and shoot. And that's why you can plug them in at the power forward if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the David Lee trade, right, it does save a lot of money, but in a way, it's almost like an embarrassment of riches type of situation for the Warriors. Like, they kept saying, yeah, David Lee, we think you're good, but we're just not going to play you. So they're like, we can just afford to give you away, David Lee. That's how much we love you, and that's how much talent we have. So, kind of an asshole move for the Warriors in a way, but nice to David Lee, I guess.
Not really. The reality is he's going to a bad team that's going to have to play him regardless. Although the Celtics have a lot of bigs too, but the reality there is if you're coming up on a contract year, you don't want to be coming off the bench. You don't want to be getting limited minutes. So if the Celtics play him, this was a big favor to David Lee.
And it's so interesting because I agree with everything you just said, of course. It's what we always say, just play your best players regardless of their size. Of course, you can't play all smalls or all bigs. That won't work. But, in general. And, with David Lee, it was funny, but the comment Steve Kerr was saying, he said, look, he just cannot guard the perimeter, and that's all that matters to us is guarding the perimeter. So, yeah, kind of a weird situation, but it's over.
Well, to be fair, and this is what we've kind of said about defense, and one of the things we noticed about the Warriors is that basically if you want a really good defense, it has to be a team scheme. It's almost NFL-ish. And that's really hard. Now, to be fair, it's a little confusing, in my opinion, to have a 4 and say we really need this 4 to guard the perimeter, because how many power forwards can you think of in the NBA that really take a lot of threes? I can think of 2 off the top of my head. I might try and cheat and do a basketball reference look
Good
up
call.
in a second. But how many power forwards can you think of that really take a lot of perimeter shots?
No, I mean, not that many. I'm sure they're there, and I'm sure there's some data that led Steve Kerr to say, yeah, all I care about is defending threes, from my power forward. But, yeah, I mean, it seems a little bit heavy-handed to me is the point. Like, yeah, this can be our ethic, that everyone on our team needs to defend, and that's why we're good. But it seems like they threw out the baby with the bathwater a little bit by benching Lee last year.
Yeah, I mean,
at the same time, though, maybe it was the right call, because they're just saying, if he's not one of our top 3 or 4 players, which at this point he's not, we just can't pay him that much money. He can't be on the roster.
Well, that's absolutely true. If you're not going to play him more than, if you're not going to play him multiple minutes, then absolutely it's not really worth doing. But I do think you're kind of right, where we've talked about this a lot. You kind of zoom in on specific skill sets. And I will say that is a point. One of David Lee's greatest skill sets was his basically rebounding and scoring. And this is a team that doesn't need that. Right. So it makes sense, but it also, to me, seems, I think, to like what you're saying, it's kind of pointing the finger the wrong way. It's saying this is like a baseball team, we can't play David Lee because we already have 2 good first basemen. Well, that's not David Lee's fault.
Right.
It's not David Lee's fault that you managed to pick up a bunch of first basemen. I mean, if this team had picked up Kevin Love, David Lee would have been even more redundant. So it's one of those, it's not his fault. I can't blame him for it, and I can't blame the team for it. But I think I think David Lee got a lot of guff for things that weren't his fault. And when you say David Lee can't guard the perimeter, I'm going to look at you and go, this is a 6'9" guy that can rebound like mad. why are you putting him near the perimeter? Like, why would you think to do that? But what are you going to do? Some other names, although some of these players have washed out: Rashard Lewis, Carmelo Anthony. I could kind of
That's true.
give
He's
you.
been a power forward the last few years.
I'm not seeing a bunch of like power forwards that do this. So if you've got an offense that really can't, Ryan Anderson. Okay, I can give you Ryan Anderson, Kevin Love, and Dirk Nowitzki. And Dirk Nowitzki at this point is, if you're going to complain about defense guarding the perimeter, well, Dirk Nowitzki is not going to be able to do anything on the other side. So anyway, not David Lee's fault. I wrote an article. I'll throw up the defense thing. I don't think that's a valid complaint. I think a valid thing that Kerr could have said is, look, we're overloaded on all the skills David Lee has at this point, and we would like the younger players that are going to be on the team. That's another part, right? David Lee's $12 million a year. When his contract's up, they're not going to re-sign him. They've just committed to Klay Thompson. I don't know the deal with Mo Spates. That I would have kept Mo
He's
Spates
back
over.
at near the veteran minimum, 2.5 million, something like that.
I don't know. It's not horrible, but I still would have just let him go. Um,
Yep.
So anyway, they could have just said, "Hey, look, we're overloaded on talent," and we get it. He was signed in the old regime, right? David Lee was signed before the new owners came in, before the new management, before the new coaches. We have no problem with that, but basically, we're going to go with our team, and we wish David Lee the best. So that's what I would have given it.
And
But
here's
yeah,
their silver lining for them. I'll just say real quick. I'm not necessarily sure that Gerald Wallace is going to be less productive than David Lee next year. He's been hurt. They've both been hurt in recent years. Wallace has said, I'm not the same Crash anymore, hinting that, maybe injuries have slowed him down, but he was okay last year. He wasn't that much worse
well,
than
let's
Lee.
just point out, like David Lee got what 900 minutes on the team last year.
Yeah.
Not that many. Let me see if I can get this up in front of me. The Warriors last season, but basically, David Lee didn't really get any minutes last season, and they still did really well. They won in the 60s, and they've got young players that are getting older. And Gerald Wallace didn't really play many minutes last season, and he's got the same David Lee problem. A lot of the skills he's got are at positions that you've already got covered. So it's not like you particularly need him. I mean, David Lee got 107 minutes in the playoffs, so it's not like you're losing anything that major, to be
Yep.
honest. And I think Gerald Wallace is candidly, I think he's injury insurance because there are a lot of players on this team that get major minutes. If Klay Thompson gets injured, if Andre Iguodala needs a break, Maurice Spates, there are a lot of players, Sean Livingston, there are a lot of players of similar size that he can probably come in and play some productive minutes for, but he's not going to be an important part of this team. He's just, and I don't know his cost. And I don't even know, like I said, it's entirely possible. I don't keep track of enough things. They might just waive him or whatever. But
Supposedly they're going to keep him, but here's my last word on this. Watch out for James Michael McAdoo, the D-League and Summer League star. He could sneak in there and get a lot of power forward minutes for the Warriors. He's been really good.
all right, I'll believe it when I see it because his NBA production, if I recall, has not been.
Oh, no, it's been good. Limited, but good. Limited
All right. Oh,
minutes.
really? Okay. So
Yeah.
you got to bring this. We're going to actually analyze this because, as I mentioned, it's a slow week, and I actually want to see it. So McAdoo,
Distant
not
relative of the famous Bob McAdoo, the old school NBA player.
the best McAdoo ever. Who, interestingly enough, right? Oh, you are right. So, okay, in 137 minutes, he basically put up David Lee production, and he's younger, cheaper. All right, there you go. James McAdoo is going to replace David Lee. Gerald Wallace gives you some insurance off the bench for a lot of your players that might just need a rest. Andre Iguodala. There you go. The Warriors seem fine to me. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I got nothing.
All right, I want to talk a little. So I don't really care to talk too much more about it. I just got an excuse to do two of my loves when I first got into sports or statistics, rather. I really liked movie gross statistics. One of my first sites that I started reading was called the-numbers.com, which did movie grosses. Pretty sure that inspired the name Nerd Numbers when it came time for me to get myself a URL. So what I did is I compared Trainwreck to Space Jam, and the cheat code, the answer is the international market is unfair in movies. So even if Trainwreck goes all out and does about as well as you would expect, which would be about Bridesmaids level, LeBron James, in terms of gross from the movie Trainwreck, can expect to do about as well as Space Jam did back when it came out because Space Jam just did so well in the international market. Another good example of this, by the way, a movie that just came out was Pixels with Adam Sandler that got panned by the critics, underperformed domestically at the box office. Everybody's saying, see, Adam Sandler sucks. And guess what? In the first weekend, it already grossed 60 million internationally. So the reality is that international market is one of those things movie people need to look at. There's a good Cracked article on it. It turns out that having really good dialogue, really witty stuff doesn't matter necessarily as much as having something entertaining that, subtitled or whatever, everybody can understand. So, Space Jam, Pixels, worse movies than Trainwreck, but are both pretty much outperformed it. But that said, my end thing was I was saying Trainwreck was an R-rated movie starring, well, not starring LeBron James, but with LeBron James, and it might do about as well as Space Jam, which was a horrible PG movie that was marketed internationally with Michael Jordan. So I basically said LeBron James is in the harder league, and I gave him the win. And what was awesome to me is the comment section. It kind of got derailed, but not in the way it made me upset. Sometimes the comment section gets derailed with insults, people spewing incorrect statistics. But no, in this case, we had stuff such as people bringing up other movies. So let me see if I can get through the comment section quickly. But Chris Ye brought up like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Airplane, Bernard King and Fast Break. God, I've never got myself to watch this, but The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh, it starred Dr. J. No one actually brought up Blue Chips, which was odd. And then we also had, some people point out that Mad Max was the same as Waterworld. And then I mentioned that on Twitter, and someone mentioned to me that Waterworld was essentially Mad Max. So there you go. It completes itself. We got some people saying Bruce Lee was overrated, which, oh my goodness. I cannot. I let the comment go because I enjoyed the discussion. I don't stand behind that. I think Bruce Lee was amazing. But yeah, I loved the comment section on Space Jam versus or Trainwreck versus Space Jam by the numbers. This is exactly what I kind of want a comment section to be in the off season, arguing about Bruce Lee, talking about other movies, talking about movie grosses, talking about Mad Max. All I could ask for. So thank you for that. Wish I had more time to get involved in the comments, but as you've noticed, I don't really comment as much anymore. I just don't have the time to. Got that. And then I think you mentioned on our poll last week, essentially, unsurprisingly, on an NBA site, LeBron James smoked John Cena 61-21 in our poll. Should be noted that means less people voted. I think it's the offseason and not as many people saw Trainwreck, but there you go.
It's worth seeing though, Dre. You recommend it?
I do. Trainwreck.
You like it?
All right. Now on to the sad topic. So for those of you that don't know, Hulk Hogan was recently basically erased from WWE history in the sense that if you go to their website, a bunch of his content is taken down. He's been fired by the company. He's not there anymore. And the belief is that it's related to a bunch of racist statements he made in a sex tape that Gawker leaked. And he's currently in a $100 million lawsuit with Gawker over the leaking of this. And, a bunch of people are coming out against Hulk Hogan, and I'm not against that, but this feels very reminiscent of Donald Sterling to me. Basically being, this happened years and years ago. Hulk Hogan has actually said racist statements in public interviews before this leak. The WWE in general has had serious problems with race. There's someone who I was following who I'm going to give a shout out to preemptively. I'll just say Mark Lamont Hill was talking about the number of African-American, world champions in the WWE and just how pitifully small that is. We look at, Vince McMahon himself used the N-word on air as a gag at one point and not that long ago. I forget his role, but Paul Levesque, a.k.a. Triple H, who is a higher up at the company, when he was a wrestler, one of his famous shticks was he came out in blackface to impersonate The Rock. Someone sent me a video. I can't find it on my feed, but there's a man in the street kind of thing where Triple H and DX go around and just say a bunch of racist people to random people. Like they find Japanese people and say, have you seen Godzilla lately, or Pakistani people, and make the fake accent and stuff. It's not in good taste. Essentially, for as much as we talk the WWE on here, if you're a fan of the WWE, even leaving out the, underlying homosexuality that everybody brings up, and by the way, I'm not bashing that as a bad thing. I'm just saying it's very interesting for a kind of conservative blue state thing that actually has a very homophobic vibe in terms of the fans to have that in it already. It also has a ton of sexism and racism. One thing when we went out there, Brian, to WrestleMania was that the longest women's match was Stephanie McMahon talking to Ronda Rousey. The actual women's wrestling was very short lived. And by the way, to WWE's credit, recently they've tried to make the diva division stronger and have more matches, which is great. Suggestion: stop calling them divas. How's that? And get rid of the stupid belt that's like a butterfly that's colored pink or whatever.
Let's bring
But
back
that's
the $1 million belt. That's a real belt.
the million. Oh, okay. Well, on that note, when we talk racism in the WWE, you are aware, was it Virgil? What was the
Yeah,
name?
that's why I brought it up. It's Virgil. Yep.
The $1 million man had a bodyguard slash slave and I feel bad saying it that way, but it's true.
That's
Had
how it was
a
booked. Yeah.
had a bodyguard named Virgil who was essentially his slave that was dressed in, Paula Deen got in trouble for kind of trying to dress her wait staff in plantation style gear and using the N word. And the WWE had an African American dressed in plantation style clothing who was the manservant to a rich white guy.
He was the bodyguard.
The body,
Yeah.
whatever. I'm calling it man. He had like a bow tie and it was bad. It was bad. And the WWE is not free of this. Like, you don't need to go back even 5 years to find an example of like racism. And in the WWE and a lot of the WWE's African American characters, this was what Mark Lamont was talking about, or actually no, Grantland. Grantland had a fantastic piece on this where basically all of their people of color in the WWE are caricatures. When they let in Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero, these, we finally got some Latino representation. They ride low riders, they're thieves. It was, yeah, it's amazing to think I'm a fan. But anyway, so back to the original point. So Hulk Hogan gets outed for this. And the reason I feel sad is just because to me, this feels a lot like coaching in the NBA, where you have a bad team that's poorly run that's not going to win a lot of games. And in this case, when I mean poorly run, I mean I don't anticipate racism being solved in the WWE anytime soon or ESPN, which we'll get to in a second. And the easy thing to do is you find someone who says an overtly racist statement and you shout them down and you fire them and you say, see, we don't approve of racism. And the same thing happened with Donald Sterling. You get rid of Donald Sterling. See, not WWE, the NBA does not approve of racism. And then you still have owners that, in my opinion, basically make very subtle digs at African Americans for trying to be entrepreneurs, which is just kind of out there. So
did you go as far as to say scapegoating? Is it scapegoating?
it is. It's 100% because the WWE, the president of the WWE has said racist statements on air. I don't know Triple H's official title, but he's high up there. I think he's like second in command. He's
also the son, Vince.
Son-in-law.
Yeah, son-in-law.
He's done horribly racist things on air. Michael Hayes, who was a big name in there, has done horribly racist things on air. And it's basically, them coming out and saying, we approve diversity and blah, 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 blah. Well, fine. Then the other question I have about Hulk Hogan is, he made these statements in 2012. And do you really want me to believe that in the last 3-4 years, Hulk Hogan did nothing else bad, especially considering that he's got other interviews where he said racist statements? It's, basically this is getting in front of a PR storm. This is not in the name of diversity. It is 100% scapegoating. It's saying, we will offer you up Hulk Hogan so that we can still do our pervasive racist stuff. We will just make sure that if someone steps over the line, I think you kind of mentioned this with Stephen A. We bring him up a lot. Essentially, a network kind of wants to toe this line. And, I don't know the reasons. There's lots of stuff behind it. There's lots of reasons why there's racial tensions and, underlying remarks about people of color in the United States. We have the cop problems. And a lot of networks pander to this, Cracked, the site has brought up, many times that you can't be African American and date a white person in pop culture. That's just one of those weird things that all movie studios kind of silently agree to. Now, that's not acceptable, but you can't really catch them on it. But if one of their executives says a really racist statement, you throw that person out, you fire them, you say, see, we don't approve of racism. And you can go back to being more subtly racist. And that's where the WWE is. And they don't even have to be that subtle. Basically, that's what I'm saying. They're throwing out the stuff he said is horrific. It's horrifically racist in a sense that, go read the transcripts if you just want to feel dirty. And I'm saying that's what they did. They threw out like the absolute worst case scenario in terms of someone being racist so they could go back to being less racist.
So I didn't go all the way through it, Drake. Can you just give a little bit of summary? It goes on for a while, right? It's like a tirade almost.
I don't want to. This is bad. So
well, okay, then. But
we'll
the point is, it's definitely not a slip of the tongue. It's an extended thing.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, when Hulk Hogan came out after the fact and said, I apologize, I'm not a racist. You just have to look and go, then how the heck did you go on as long as you did on that tangent? Like, sorry, no.
Because part of it included him saying, I am a racist, didn't it?
He said, like, everybody's a little racist. I think
which is true. But anyway, sorry, keep going.
He starts talking about his daughter and dating black people, and it gets bad. It gets out of hand quick. And then him asking why he can't use the N-word, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's all I got on that. It's Donald Sterling all over again. It's depressing. It makes me sad. And it brings me to another point. Colin Cowherd is out at ESPN because he basically said he doesn't see why so many people think baseball is a thinking man's sport because Dominicans are stupid. That was the crux of what he said. And, obviously this got, the eye of people like Pedro Martinez and Jose Bautista, who said, what are you talking about? And ESPN kicked him out. But this is another issue where his contract was already up and he was already leaving. So them firing him preemptively doesn't really mean much. And again, to me, this is kind of that example of it's very clear when you go over the line. Now, that said, by the way, Stephen A is still employed and he's said plenty of racist and sexist remarks. So I don't know. ESPN doesn't seem to care. But again, it's, with a lot of these organizations, I don't hate that when there's a PR circus, they get rid of the person. It just, what I wish is that instead of saying we're getting rid of Colin Cowherd, we're sorry, they said, we're sorry, we're going to fix this in the future. Heck, keep Cowherd around and apologize and do things correctly. As long as we keep going on this route of just firing the overtly racist people and ignoring the pervasive racism, it's not getting anywhere.
Well, right, and that's the point in the end, is ESPN is not doing this to take any kind of moral high ground. They're doing it because they think they need to do it. So
it's almost David Leish in that his contract was up and they were going to have to get rid of him. And so this is just a convenient way to get him out. This is just a convenient way to get him out. You could even argue Donald Sterling was the same for the NBA, where he was a horrible owner, not in the sense of him being racist and sexist and all this other stuff, but just he was a bad owner. He ran a team in one of the biggest markets horribly. And so this gave them an excuse to get him out. And so it's kind of the same case here. And so what I'm going to bring up last is Donald Trump. This is old news at this point, but if you haven't seen it, the clip's up. He basically called Mexican immigrants thieving rapists. And he's the most popular GOP candidate. And this to me actually shows kind of the end result of what I'm talking about here with the other racist people, in that essentially Donald Trump is super rich. And there's no one to tell him to stop. I don't know what his real net worth is. People have argued about this before, but he claims it's near 10 billion. Some stuff came out that says he's got a lot of assets and values and whatever that's worth a ton. He's super rich, and you tell him stop being racist, and he can look at you and say, I don't want to. And what happens? A lot of people like him. And that to me is a problem with racism in pop culture and mainstream, is that for it to get fixed requires people with power to make very concerted and hard efforts to fix the problem, not just getting rid of the racist people in positions, because that's really hard to do. It's really hard to just get rid of all the racists, but to give opportunities to people to actually ensure other stuff, ensure representation. Like we mentioned, female athletes get, 2% of the time on Sports Center. Okay, the only way that's going to get fixed is that they get more time. The only way racism is going to get fixed is if we go out of our way to actually try and fix it. And if entitled people basically say, I don't want to, they get away with it. And that's kind of the The sad exclamation point on this rant is Donald Trump basically shows the end problem. You get someone rich enough that's racist that doesn't want to stop being racist. Without a really concerted effort, they will just fire people. They'll just fire a scapegoat at you every now and then to try and give you a moral victory. I'll put that in quotes. And even in Donald Sterling's case, which was the best example, he got $2 billion for his team. His punishment was that he made $2 billion on, I think, a $10 million investment in the 70s, which even adjusted for inflation is over $1 billion return. So sorry, this is the depressing, not happy ending story. Racism sucks. It's in a lot of the stuff I like, which, I just have to reconcile and deal with. And one of the notes I made when I sent out the email to you, Brian, is I'm an affluent minority in the United States of America. My parents both have Ivy League degrees from grad school. I got a computer science degree. I've done very well for myself as a software engineer, and I still have to see stuff like this. And I've still seen cases of profiling against me, things like airports, etc. We have a problem with race in this country, and there are just weeks where it's, when it kind of seeps into your escapes, when it seeps into sports, when it seeps into pop culture, where you just kind of feel a little beaten down. And that was this last week.
Yeah, I can't add anything to that really. Just that, yeah, I saw a few hours ago a friend of mine on social media talked about getting profiled at the airport, and needless to say, she has a very prominent position at a local unnamed tech company here in the Bay Area. So, I mean, yeah, status won't always get you above it. It's true.
It does. I mean, it's hilarious how little it works. And I mean, one thing I'll be honest with, I like Hawaiian shirts. And one reason I like Hawaiian shirts, and this is a little depressing, is I believe it actually primes people into thinking I'm not Hispanic, which
Wow.
sucks. But I will actually, when I'm going to the airport, we'll think ahead and we'll wear a Hawaiian shirt and go, this might knock the TSA person just a little so that they won't, they'll be a little less likely. And then I got the TSA pre thing, so that's all right. That makes life better, but it's still.
That was her complaint, that she had the pre-check and still got selected.
What the?
Yeah.
All right. I got nothing. All right. More bad news. Well, I guess kind of. This is one of my favorite teams to bash, and I get to keep bashing them. So the Sacramento Kings, apparently Dean Oliver is out in Sacramento, according to a Ball Don't Lie blog, was it Kelly Dwyer or Dan Devine who brought this up, where essentially he wasn't invited. It was Eric Freeman. Apologies, Eric Freeman. Eric Freeman is awesome too over at Yahoo. Kelly Dwyer, Dan Devine, Eric Freeman, you're all awesome. But essentially it looks like Vivek Ranadiv is going for Vlad Divac. Is it Vlade? It's Vlade Divac.
That's right.
DeMarcus Cousins isn't really listening to Dean Oliver, and Dean Oliver basically went to summer league on his own dime, didn't have credentials, doesn't appear the team is listening to him. Not that hard to believe when you watch their offseason. And all I can do is kick the Kings and say, I don't understand. Like, there are very few people in this industry that are both respected and listened to and intelligent, and Dean Oliver is one of them. I don't know anybody that has a legitimate complaint about Dean Oliver. He's one of the most well-liked people in the industry. He's one of the sharpest. He wrote the book on this, and for a team to waste that talent is just criminal, in my opinion. And I don't understand what's going on with the Kings, but I can tell you, an organization that basically says, hey, we've got Dean Oliver in charge, excuse me, and we're going to listen to Vlade Divac instead. Oh, and Kevin Draper did. I'll have to read this. So you gave a nice link. I'll assume you'll scroll it. You gave a nice link to a
Yeah,
Kevin
I'll bring
Draper
up the Kevin
piece
Draper article right now.
on the Kings. But yeah, just I can only imagine that he's saying the same stuff, where if you're looking at how this team is being run, the moves they're doing, etc., it's just not in a good shape, and it's not going to be for a while if they keep going this route. So apologies, Dean. You deserve better. Kings, you're done. Like, strike three. Vivek Ranadiv, who I actually did meet at Sloan. I think I had a picture somewhere. Maybe I'll put it in the article if I can find it. All that said, good job. You're not as bad as the Maloofs, but that's not saying anything.
Well, and here's the part we're always sad about, right? Like you like to point out, Vivek Ranadive himself was, in a a Gladwell book. Like, he was featured as an analytics guy by Gladwell, and that was our expectations for him coming into Sacramento, right? That he was actually going to put some of this, Silicon Valley kind of business experience into the Kings.
Well, even more so, the exact story. Let's get rid of the Silicon Valley.
David and Goliath, was that the one?
David and Goliath.
Yeah, remind us of that. Remind us of that.
But okay, so you know me. I'm a little jaded on Silicon Valley, always knowing the right way to do things with analytics.
But compared to the NBA, though,
well, we'll leave that off the table. What I'll say here is, in the book, he coached his daughter's team, and his daughter and her friends, because they were all Silicon Valley, daughters of Silicon Valley, tech people. They weren't the most athletic. They were kind of geeky. They couldn't really shoot. And what he went for is, he said, I'm going to have you run a lot, so you're going to have a lot of stamina. I'm going to have you focus on the full court press because I want you to get more steals. I'm going to have you focus on rebounding. So basically the games turned into lots of turnovers, lots of rebounds, lots of putbacks. That was essentially their mantra. And you go, oh, so this guy thinks that rebounds and steals and, being able to out-hustle the opponent, defense, are what matters. And then what happens when he takes over Sacramento? He goes for all these scorers and shooters. And so you go, I don't get it. You got into this sport, and that was the other part of the book in David and Goliath, was that he didn't know basketball. He played cricket and soccer, and he viewed basketball like soccer and said, why are we giving up the whole court? Why are we letting them dribble the ball up to half court before the game starts? Why don't you attack them earlier? That was his first thought. So he doesn't know basketball. He learned the intuitions he learns was the value of possessions. And then he gets an NBA team and he basically just goes back to yay points. And he ignores one of the fathers of analytics who talks about possessions. He ignores one of the best offensive. That's the other ironic part. If you're going to go for yay points, well, then George Karl, listen to George Karl, because George Karl may not play the right players, may not understand the value of rebounds, but he will get your offense running. Nope. So it's like, I don't even understand what's going on. Doesn't understand his own lessons. Possessions are important. Doesn't understand how to make a good offense. He's got one of the best offensive coaches out there. Basically, he's like listening to two centers who, Vlade Divac was very good in his prime, and DeMarcus Cousins has all the skills in the world, but is stupid, and I don't get it. How rich people waste their money, good on them. If you want to just send me a couple $1 million, Vivek, go for it. I could use it. I won't light it on fire here, and I'll put it in a bank or something and let it gain interest.
Yeah, and I've got the infamous Tom Ziller article on SB Nation up from a few weeks ago where he says the cart isn't just before the horse here, the cart has lapped the horse. I think we brought this up on a previous show. But yeah, I mean,
that's a good line. Is that a common one? The cart isn't just in front of the horse, the cart has lapped the horse. That feels like it's cliched, but
it might be. Like that. But, I mean, what he's saying is basically the way they screwed up is even more than ignoring analytics, that they made this trade that everyone panned on draft day to get rid of all of this, talent with the Sixers. But then the guys they were targeting, they didn't even get. So they kind of failed on the analytics side and on the, relationship side with the agents. So it was just a complete organizational failure.
I don't know what they're doing. Like, there are teams that have bad plans. Like the Knicks, I can see sometimes and go, wow, that Isaiah Thomas, you're like, I see your plan. It's a horrible plan, but I see what you're doing. The Kings, I'm like, what's your end game? Well, what is the goal of this? If I found out it was some kind of, major league kind of strategy of get the team to lose so many games that it moves to Miami, that would be more believable at this point than any other.
The reporting on this just doesn't add up. We've got to see what is the reality here in a year or so, I think.
I'm telling you, they're out. Like, they're done. Like, yeah. I'm just like, I don't know what you were doing, but you suck at basketball. Good luck. Let's see if you pick things up. I'll check back in later.
I just don't get it, though. How does this Gladwell guy, how does he go from there to hiring Divac, who says, I don't use analytics? Like, it's such a quick collapse.
Well, we'll talk about this in shoutouts or maybe even next. Rich people have an issue in that it's very, we hear this term used incorrectly all the time on the internet, the echo chamber, this idea that you're only listening to people that validate your own ideas. And that's not true. A lot of people that say, social justice warriors only listen to themselves in echo chambers or even, MRA people. It's not exactly true. Rich people do have a very real problem with echo chambers because as soon as you're rich and powerful, it is very, very hard to surround yourself with people that are going to call you when you're wrong, who are going to say, stop doing that. And it will become very appealing to have more faith in yourself that you know you're successful and you know what you're doing. Ergo, even if something's not adding up, well, you know what you're doing. And it's those two things compiled can make it very, very difficult for, essentially successful people to have a good view of reality when they're doing unsuccessful things. And I think that's my best hypothesis of what's going on with the Kings is you have a very smart, successful person in a field he doesn't get that is getting the wrong type of feedback. And because he's rich and powerful, there is no way anybody's really going to be able to break through to him and say, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah, I guess he needs more of an echo chamber because he's just not listening to anyone right now. I don't know. Who knows?
All right. Well, let's go over the wall of boredom. So I have my ESPN moves of the last week transactions. So let's talk a few. The Cavaliers re-signed Matthew Dellavedova. He is an below average player who can't shoot worth a lick, who maybe did some good defense in the playoffs, maybe. It's not an expensive contract. This is a case where I think you probably could have gone to the D Leagues International undrafted player and offered the league minimum, which they're allowed to do. The reason players like this are appealing, like Dellavedova, are appealing for the Cavs boils down to the fact that they're out of money, especially when you view that they're going to probably, if they re-sign Tristan Thompson, they're going to pay like $300 million. So out of money, out of cap space. With how well Dellavedova has played, I would say spin the dice on someone new, guys. But I'm happy to be proven wrong. So Dellavedova, you're cheap, so you're not a major mistake, but we'll see. I'm going to see if there's even anybody else I care about. I'm just going to scroll down. We already discussed David Lee. The Pacers, man, remember when they used to be good? Bunch of no names that they've signed that aren't good. Got to give some props to the Miami Heat, who traded away Shabazz Napier to the Orlando Magic for a protected second-round draft pick, and then also traded away Zoran Dragic. This is kind of far out, right? A 2020 second-round draft pick in cash to Boston for a 2016 second-round draft pick. So, got to give it to them. They picked up 2 draft picks in the next draft and gave up, 2 guards that aren't that great. I'm fine with it. And like I said, I'm just skipping moves that I don't really care about. A lot of just shuffling deck chairs or players that aren't that productive. The Hornets picked up Tyler Hansbrough, who is actually an above-average player. We're a fan of him next season in some regards. They did let go of one of Patrick's favorites, Bismack Biyombo, but he went to Toronto in not a surprise move. So there you go. Hornets have I think you put it on the pre-show, Brian, the potential to make the playoffs in the East.
Yeah, they might. It's the East is getting a little bit better this offseason, I think, but not a lot. We'll have to, put it all together and see what it's like near the beginning of the season. But I will give the Kings this much credit. They signed Seth Curry, Steph's little brother. He can shoot the 3. Great move, Kings. Caron Butler, though, not so much, Kings.
Well, Caron Butler was good at one point. It's just one of those, when players get old and, start on that downhill climb.
He's had so many injuries. He's had a lot over his career.
Did you really? Well, I don't. It's hard to tell, right? Seth Curry has played a combined 11.
Sorry, I mean Caron Butler has. Yeah, Seth Curry is virtually
Seth Curry
unknown.
Played a combined 21 minutes, and in those 21, he's been really good, really bad, decent. So we'll just have to see. But whatever. I guess I have no faith there.
The only other one I'll pick off from this list is, if anyone can make Jimmer Fredette good, it's the Spurs. So the Spurs experiment continues.
Oh, Jimmer? They just got a 3. Yeah, it makes sense. Get a 3-point shooter. All right. And I don't really know Jonathan Simmons that well, but I'm a fan of Jimmer Fredette. He'll get some 3s. He'll get his reps in there. And then he'll probably get inflated and signed to a bigger contract than he deserves. So, Jimmer basically just won the lottery with that. So good on him. That's all I really got for that. I'm ready to go straight to shout outs unless you've got anything else to say on the off season, on racism, on Bruce Lee being overrated, any of that jazz.
No, I don't think Bruce Lee's overrated.
No one.
I'm against
uh,
Dodgson on this one.
Who thinks anyway? The other thing to consider about Bruce Lee when we're talking racism is there wasn't a Bruce Lee in the United States before Bruce Lee. The idea of an Asian person being just the absolute action star. And it's worth noting that he died really young. Like
33, I believe.
he died right because Enter the Dragon basically came out after he died.
Right.
If that, that thing, and I'm actually curious, let's take a look at the numbers, but that movie, put him on the map. One of the best movies, if you've got a chance to watch it, is Game of Death, where he fights against Chuck Norris. It's a great movie. The movie where they took his likeness, and I forget what it's called, the one that actually has Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Please don't watch that. That's a horrible movie. But
that one is Game of Death. I forget what the Chuck Norris one's called.
Oh no! What? Oh, it's Return of the. What did I say? Return of the Dragon.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, this is interesting. Enter the Dragon did not do that hot domestically, but it was rated really well. I don't know what it's. The problem is it grossed 21 million in 1973, which seems like a good amount actually if we adjust for inflation. I just don't know its budget, etc. But anyway, he died before he got a chance to take off, and it's worth wondering what would have happened if he gotten a chance to stick around. Yeah. Anyway, all right. With that said, let's go to shoutouts. You actually have two, and one of them I'm going to argue with you. So let's get through those.
Oh, good. Let's see. Let's do the non-arguing on first then. Let's see. Okay, I'll do. First, we got to do Boston here.
I like this one.
Let me bring up that article. But yeah. So Boston today, they basically said, "Sorry Olympics, sorry IOC, we don't want to host them," and they pretty much said they would not gonna stick their neck out for cost overages, so the IOC withdrew the bid. And that's pretty much it. So good job, Boston. They probably would have lost money off of it.
Devin Dignam sent along, I'll see if I remember the link. If I forget, apologies. He sent me a link today that basically said the Sochi Olympics were over by billions. So
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, if you're a city and they said you want the Olympics, you say no.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in terms of the rest of mine, okay, I'll just take one more, and then you can do the others. I'll take Josh Smith. Is this the one you want to argue about?
I do.
Okay, good. I will take Josh Smith as a shout-out just because, for what I can tell, I think the media took those comments a little out of context. I mean, is he out of touch? Maybe. Is he not the smartest guy out there in the NBA? Probably. But still, I mean, compared to what the owners are doing these days, we're going to say Josh Smith is the most out-of-touch guy. I don't know. He didn't quite go full Spreewell. He didn't go, I need to feed my family, and I think it's kind of getting treated that way.
He did talk about his family, but I will give you that. It's that if you're going to be outraged about Josh Smith, I think I said this. I forget the article I said this. Oh, it was about DeAndre Jordan, where I said if you're going to be angry about DeAndre Jordan, that's
good analogy.
Fine. But you should be freaking outraged at the NBA, particularly the owners. It's the same thing here. If you're going to be outraged at Josh Smith saying, well, I can't afford to take a pay cut, I got a family to feed, that's what I'll take exception with. He's using his family. If the line he had said was, I can't afford, it's going to be hard for me because essentially I had a lump sum lottery payout, now I'm getting annuities, and that's a different lifestyle than I'm used to, more power to him. The family statement's a little whatever. But what I will say is, if those statements offend you, then owners who are asking cities for millions of dollars, looking at you, Milwaukee, you should be furious because they're saying things even more out of touch and more outrageous than that. We need a holographic projector. We need more seats. We need these. So I disagree. I think Josh Smith was slightly offensive there, but then I'll agree and say, fine, if you want to be offended at Josh Smith, then you'd better be up night and day cursing like Dan Gilbert.
Right, and the other thing I'll say is I didn't feel like he was complaining. Like, the way I looked at it, someone said, you left a lot of money on the table there, Josh Smith. And he said, yeah, I did, but, I've got a family, but I'll be okay. That's basically what he said.
I can give you that. You don't want to take Becky Hammon? Well, let's do that. Becky Hammon.
Yeah, go for it.
Won Summer League. What I love about Greg Popovich, by the way, is he basically has said a bunch of statements like, it doesn't enter his mind that Becky Hammond is a woman, etc. And I don't think that's true. I think I read some people saying that. But essentially, the Spurs are playing this the right way, which is I think they clearly made a motivated effort to put a female coach in the NBA, and good on them for that. But they're playing it the right way. So I'm liking this from the Spurs. And candidly, I really hope that, Popovich is getting up there in age, unless he's Yoda or
Oh,
something.
I was hoping you'd say this.
I'd really love to see Becky Hammond be the first NBA head coach
Oh,
and be
that'd
of
be
the
so
Spurs.
great.
It would be amazing if she kind of did a Pat Riley thing where, it was like first year out wins a title. That would be amazing. And she's on the team to do it. Yeah, so that definitely deserves a shout out. I've got two. First is Curtis Harris, who you can also, I think he's pro hoops history as well. But I made a joke, sad statement of reality where I said, is there an Onion article yet that says WWE is shocked to discover it's racist? And Curtis Harris's response was to say, how about one that says WWE shocked to discover it's homoerotic? By the way, if you think the WWE is having trouble now trying to erase a racist person from their history, we're on the precipice of a lot of I always get this messed up, LGTM rights in this country getting better. Thank goodness. And I really hope in 10, 20 years, we look back at this, even this era now where the progression is happening. I really hope in 10, 20 years, we look back and still view this era as hilariously tragic, if that makes any sense. But if you think the WWE has had trouble erasing that, they have had a lot of homophobia in their history too, that they will have some trouble getting off the books as well. So there you go. The last one is Mark Lamont Hill, who had a bunch of great remarks about Hulk Hogan, et cetera. And one of the things he brought up was just the low number. Fantastic follow. Follow him at Mark Lamont Hill. That's Mark with a C on Twitter. Great follow. And he was talking about how the number of title holders in the WWE that are African American is just ludicrously low. And even The Rock, one of the most well-known names, before he was a title holder, when he was, kind of the bad guy, he was in something called the Nation of Domination, where he was being played as a black character. He's black, obviously, so that's fine. At that point, Triple H, who's head of the company, actually went in blackface to make fun of him. So there you go. But when he became title holder, they basically changed the shtick and called him Samoan. So it's one of those where the WWE can't even acknowledge someone's, being black in the company if they give them the title. So great follow, kind of depressing, but really enjoyed it. Last shout out, I think I already said this, but all of the fantastic comments on the Trainwreck versus Space Jam post. These are exactly the type I like. This is why the comment section sticks around, because candidly, if you were like normal people on the internet, it would have been dead a long time ago. So thank you for that. If you don't have anything to add, Brian, I'll just say thanks for watching the show. It's the Boxscore Geeks show. If you found us not through our website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. Find us on iTunes and Stitcher as the Boxscore Geeks show. Go ahead and upvote us, subscribe. It really helps us out. We have a live show every Monday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, where you can hear myself and Brian talk, show fancy graphics on twitch.tv/nerd numbers. If you missed the live show, you can catch it on YouTube at Nerd Numbers as well. We have a playlist for that. So hope your week goes well. Hope the NBA offseason gets a little more exciting. And regardless, we'll see you next week.